I'm my dearest flowers of the Peter family bunch. With tears gently falling from my eyes, I begin this prayer with a heavy heart. Dear Heavenly Father, today I come before you with trembling hands and a spirit weighed down by sorrow. My soul aches as I see the declining response to my stories I pour my heart and soul into for 16 long hours each day. But Lord, I do not blame my precious flowers. Perhaps it is my own shortcoming, my inability to touch their hearts as I once did. Yet even in this moment of darkness, I thank you for blessing me with these beautiful souls, my readers, my family, my everything. Oh Lord, though my recent videos receive fewer views and my words seem to echo in emptiness, I beg you to fill each member of this family with your divine love. When they see my struggle to create content worthy of their precious time, let them not feel burden, but hope. When they sense my tears of exhaustion and doubt, let them know it's because my love for them runs deeper than any ocean. Protect them from life's storms, guide them through darkness, and keep their spirits bright even when mine dims. In your infinite mercy, hold them close when my stories fail to reach their hearts, my beloved Peter family, my precious flowers. Forgive me if my recent content has brought any disappointment. Your happiness means everything to me, and the thought that my stories may no longer bring joy to your lives brings tears I cannot hold back. If my words no longer serve their purpose, I would rather lay down my pen than see sadness in your eyes or hatred in your hearts. Yet for now, I promise to keep trying, to keep nurturing our bond until my last breath or until you tell me to stop. Today, with a heart both heavy and full of love, I bring you another story. Through these words, may you feel the depth of my devotion to you all. Now, my dear ones, shall we begin our journey into today's tale, even as my tears dry upon these pages? Would you like me to continue with the story? I can help craft a narrative that speaks to your audience's hearts. Miami's golden hour cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mason Matthews' penthouse office, 60 stories above the city's throbbing heart. The last rays of sunlight caught the edges of his custom Patek Philippe watch as he stood motionless, studying the dossier displayed on his tablet. His dark eyes narrowed at the image of Angeline de Sosa, her beauty undeniable even in the clinical surveillance photos his team had gathered. "Vincent," he called, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of ruthless business decisions. "Tell me again why she's the one." Vincent Lara, his head of security for 15 years, stepped forward from his position near the mahogany double doors. The older man's salt and pepper hair and carefully pressed suit spoke of experience and discretion, qualities Mason valued above all else since the betrayal. "She matches every parameter you specified, sir. 35 years old, excellent health history, advanced degree from Howard University, no family complications." Vincent paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And she has that quality you mentioned, an elegance that can't be bought." Mason's jaw tightened as he swiped through more photos. Angeline at charity galas, her dark skin glowing against designer gowns. Angeline leaving exclusive restaurants, her bearing regal despite the paparazzi's intrusion. Angeline at tech conferences, her intelligence evident in her engaged expression as she discussed innovations with industry leaders. "Show me the background check again." Vincent transmitted the file to the massive holographic display that dominated one wall of the office. Data points sparkled in the air like stars. Financial records, educational history, social connections, all perfect, too perfect. "Something's off," Mason muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. At 45, he'd earned every grey strand through battles in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. "Nobody's this clean." "We've been watching her for 6 months, sir. Every detail checks out." Vincent hesitated. "But if you're having doubts..." "No." Mason turned away from the hologram, moving to the wet bar that gleamed with crystal and rare spirits. He poured himself 2 fingers of 50-year-old Macallan, the amber liquid catching the dying light. "We proceed as planned. Make the offer." $10 million is a lot of money to risk on intuition. Mason's laugh was bitter as he savored the scotch. $10 million is nothing compared to what my last mistake cost me. His free hand unconsciously touched the left side of his chest, where his wedding ring used to rest. $2 billion and 3 years of my life, all because I trusted the wrong woman. The memory of that day still burned, walking into his home office to find Rebecca with James, his CFO of 10 years, their heads bent over documents that would have stripped him of everything. The prenup they'd found a way around, the shareholders they'd turned against him, the empire they'd nearly destroyed while he'd been lost in grief over their daughter's death. Never again. "The mansion in the Keys is prepared?" he asked, pushing away the darkness of the past. "Yes, sir. Fully staffed, security in place, all contingencies covered." Vincent pulled up another hologram, showing the $20 million beachfront property. "The prenatal agreement has been drafted by legal. Once signed, the funds will transfer immediately after completion of the arrangement." Mason nodded, his reflection in the window overlaying the Miami skyline he'd helped shape. Every tower, every development, every piece of his $15 billion empire stood as testament to his vision. But what was it worth without an heir to carry it forward? "Send the car for her tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. He drained his glass. "I want to meet her here, in my territory. And if she declines, she won't." Mason's confidence wasn't arrogance, it was experience. Women like Angeline de Sosa don't appear in Miami social circles by accident. She's looking for an opportunity. I'm offering one worth $10 million. After Vincent left, Mason remained at the window, watching darkness claim the city. One by one, lights blinked on in the surrounding towers, like stars emerging in an urban sky. His empire of steel and glass, bought with brilliance and ruthlessness in equal measure. The tablet on his desk chimed softly. Another photo of Angeline had arrived, this one from earlier that day. She was leaving her penthouse at the Four Seasons, dressed in a cream silk suit that highlighted every curve while maintaining absolute sophistication. The photographer had caught her in profile, her expression thoughtful as she spoke on her phone. Mason found himself studying her features with an intensity that surprised him. The proud arch of her neck, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the subtle curve of her lips that suggested hidden depths. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She carried herself with a quiet power that spoke to something in him. "Computer," he commanded, and the office's AI system hummed to life. "Show me the compilation of Angeline de Sosa's public appearances." The holographic display filled with video clips. Angeline at the Miami Symphony's opening night, her laugh carrying over the crowd as she discussed Brahms with the conductor. Angeline at a tech startup competition, her questions to the participants revealing a sharp understanding of emerging technologies. Angeline at the governor's charity ball, gracefully deflecting the advances of a drunk senior senator. 6 months of carefully curated appearances, each one painting a picture of a woman who would be worthy of carrying the Matthew legacy. But something about it nagged at him, like a thread pulled loose in an expensive suit. It was too perfect, too calculated. The office door opened, and Sophia, his executive assistant for 20 years, entered with a stack of contracts requiring his signature. "You're going through with it?" she asked, her tone carrying the familiarity of their long association. "The arrangements are made." Sophia placed the contracts on his desk with more force than necessary. "Mason, you're not buying a company. This is a human being." "This is business," he corrected her. "Clean, simple, contractual. No emotions, no complications, no risk. Like your marriage was supposed to be. The words hit their mark, and she knew it. Sorry, that was out of line. Mason waved away her apology, turning back to the window. The board is pressuring me about succession planning. My sister's kids are incompetent trust fund babies who'd run this company into the ground. I need an heir, Sophia, someone I can shape, train, mold in my image. And the mother of this heir? What about her? $10 million for one night. Clean, simple, final. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. No messy emotions, no betrayals, no divorce settlements. Just a business transaction between consenting adults. Sophia's sigh spoke volumes. I'll have the penthouse suite at the mansion prepared. The usual preferences. No. Mason surprised himself with the vehemence of his response. No red roses, no champagne, none of the usual accommodations. This isn't that kind of arrangement. Make it elegant but impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite. After Sophia left, Mason found himself returning to Angeline's photos. There was something in her eyes that called to him, something that suggested she might see through his carefully constructed walls to the wounds beneath. The thought was both terrifying and strangely compelling. His phone buzzed, Vincent confirming that the offer had been delivered to Angeline's apartment by private courier. Now all he could do was wait. In the gathering darkness of his office, Mason Matthew, the man who controlled billions with a single word, found himself uncharacteristically anxious about a mere $10 million proposition. Tomorrow night would either secure his legacy or prove that his instincts had finally failed him. Either way, something told him his life was about to change forever. Across the city, in a sleek apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay, Angeline de Sousa held Mason's offer in her manicured hands, a smile playing across her full lips. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Tomorrow night, Miami's most powerful man would learn that some things truly couldn't be bought, but they could be freely given if one was worthy. The lights of the city sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, a fitting backdrop for the opening move in a game neither player fully understood. Tomorrow, the true dance would begin, and all the power and wealth in Miami wouldn't prepare Mason Matthew for what was coming. The game was set, the players were ready, and in the warm Miami night, destiny held its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious in this high-stakes game of hearts and power. Chapter 2. The First Encounter. The elevator ascended silently through Matthew Industries Tower, its mirrored walls reflecting Angeline de Sousa as she adjusted her ivory Chanel suit. Her heart beat steadily, years of high-stakes business deals having taught her to control her outer appearance while her mind raced with calculations and contingencies. 60 floors above Miami, Mason Matthew paced his office like a caged predator. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, but he barely noticed the spectacular view. His attention was fixed on the security feed showing Angeline's elevator approaching. "She's early," Vincent observed from his position by the door. "Punctuality," Mason murmured. "First test passed." He moved behind his desk, a massive slab of Italian marble that had cost more than most homes. "Leave us." The elevator doors opened directly into Mason's private reception area, and Angeline stepped out with the grace of a dancer. The security camera feed hadn't done her justice. In person, she radiated a quiet power that made the air itself feel charged. "Mr. Matthew will see you now," Sophia announced, though they both knew it was purely ceremonial. Every second since Angeline had entered the building had been choreographed. Mason stood as Angeline entered his office, and for a moment, neither spoke. He took in every detail, The way her suit skimmed her curves while maintaining absolute elegance, the subtle sparkle of diamond studs in her ears, the intelligence in her dark eyes as she assessed him in return. "Ms. D'Souza," he said finally, extending his hand. "Welcome to Matthew Industries." Her grip was firm, confident. "Mr. Matthew," her voice carried a hint of amusement, "I must admit, your proposition is unusual. Please sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk, but she moved instead to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Remarkable view," she said, gazing out at the Miami skyline, "though I imagine you rarely notice it anymore." Mason found himself studying her profile, the proud arch of her neck. "You've done your research, as have you." She turned to face him, and there was something in her smile that made his pulse quicken. "Shall we discuss your offer directly, or would you prefer to maintain the illusion of social pleasantries?" Her directness caught him off guard. Most women who received his proposition responded with either eager acceptance or moral outrage. This amused confidence was unsettling. $10 million, he said, moving to join her at the window, "and one night at my mansion in the Keys. No strings, no expectations beyond the obvious." Her laugh was rich, genuine, and entirely unexpected. "And you think throwing money at the situation makes it uncomplicated? Money simplifies everything." "Does it?" She moved to examine a rare Monet on his office wall, her fingers hovering just above the canvas without touching it. "Tell me, Mr. Matthew, what makes you think I need your money?" The question struck him like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on arranging the perfect proposition that he'd never considered she might be immune to its appeal. "Everyone needs something, Ms. D'Souza." "True." She turned to face him, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. "But money?" She shook her head. "That's such an unimaginative assumption." Mason felt his carefully constructed control slipping. This wasn't following his script at all. "Then why did you agree to this meeting?" "Curiosity." She moved closer, and he caught the subtle scent of her perfume, something exotic and elegant that made him want to lean in. "I wanted to meet the man who thinks he can put a price tag on everything, even human life." Anger flared, hot and unexpected. "This is about legacy, Ms. D'Souza, about ensuring what I've built survives. You wouldn't understand." "Wouldn't I?" She stepped even closer, and suddenly he was aware of everything about her. The warmth radiating from her skin, the slight rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the challenge in her eyes. "You know nothing about me, Mr. Matthew. Yet you presume to know what I would or wouldn't understand about legacy." He found himself studying her face, searching for whatever it was that made her so different from every other woman he'd met since his divorce. "Then enlighten me. That's not part of your proposition, is it?" She gathered her purse, moving toward the door. "I'll consider your offer, Mr. Matthew, but I suggest you consider something as well. What if the price of your legacy isn't measured in dollars?" After she left, Mason stood at his window for a long time, watching the Miami traffic flow far below. For the first time since he'd conceived this plan, he felt uncertain. And uncertainty, for a man like Mason Matthew, was dangerous indeed. He pressed a button on his desk. Vincent, his security chief, appeared instantly. "Sir?" "I want everything on her. Not just the surface checks we've done. I want to know what she eats for breakfast, what she reads before bed, every detail of her life." "Something feel wrong?" Mason swirled the scotch in his glass, remembering the way she'd looked at his art collection with genuine appreciation, the way she challenged his assumptions with that maddening smile. "Something feels too right," he admitted. "And in my experience, that's far more dangerous." Later that night, in his penthouse apartment 40 floors above his office, Mason found himself unable to sleep. The city lights sparkled below, but his mind was filled with images of Angeline, the way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the subtle curve of her lips when she smiled. He pulled up her file again on his tablet, searching for something, anything, that would explain why she'd affected him so strongly. The photos showed her at various events over the past 6 months. A charity gala at the Vizcaya Museum, a tech conference in Silicon Valley, a private showing at Art Basel. Each image showed the same thing, a woman completely at ease in the world of wealth and power, yet somehow separate from it. She never appeared in the society gossip columns, never courted attention, never made the obvious moves of a social climber. His phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Found something interesting, meeting tomorrow 7 a.m. Mason's pulse quickened. Finally something concrete to explain the mystery that was Angeline de Sosa. But as he lay in his king-size bed, staring at the stars through his retractable glass ceiling, he found himself hoping that whatever Vincent had discovered wouldn't give him a reason to walk away. The next morning dawned hot and humid. Typical for Miami in summer, Mason was already in his office when Vincent arrived, armed with a thick file and a troubled expression. "What did you find?" "That's just it, sir." Vincent spread papers across the desk. "We found gaps, periods where she seems to disappear completely. No credit card transactions, no social media, no public appearances." Mason leaned forward, intrigued. "How long?" 3 months last year, 2 months the year before that. It's like she just vanishes. Medical treatments, no records we can find. Travel, no flight manifests, no passport activity. Mason stood, moving to his window wall. The morning sun turned the Miami skyline into a glittering wonderland of glass and promise. She's hiding something. Want me to dig deeper? Mason thought of Angeline's smile, the way she'd looked at his art collection with genuine appreciation, the intelligence behind her questions. "No," he said finally. "Let's see how this plays out." "Sir?" Vincent's surprise was evident. "That's not like you." "Nothing about this is like me, Vincent." Mason turned back to his security chief. "And for the first time in 3 years, that doesn't feel like a bad thing." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions, but Mason's mind kept returning to Angeline, the way she'd challenged him, the mystery of her disappearances, the feeling that she was playing a game he didn't fully understand. At sunset, his private phone, the number known to less than 10 people in the world, buzzed with a text. "Dinner tomorrow. My choice of restaurant, to discuss your proposition properly." A D. Mason stared at the message, aware that his heart was beating faster. She was taking control, changing the rules of his carefully planned game. The smart move would be to decline, to maintain the power dynamic he'd established. Instead, he found himself typing, "Name the time and place." Her response came instantly. "Le Jardin Privé. 8 p.m. Wear something that isn't a business suit." Mason laughed out loud, surprising himself. Le Jardin Privé was Miami's most exclusive restaurant, with a 2-year waiting list and a strict no-business discussion policy. Even he had to call in favors to get a table there. "Someone's been doing their homework," he murmured, already anticipating the evening to come. In her own penthouse across the city, Angeline smiled at her phone, then turned to the wall of monitors displaying everything she'd gathered on Mason Matthew over the past 6 months. His business dealings, his charitable works, his hidden pain over his daughter's death, and his wife's betrayal. "Phase 1 complete," she said softly to herself. "Let's see if you're ready for Phase 2, Mr. Matthew." The Miami night wrapped around both of them like a silk scarf, full of promise and danger in equal measure. Tomorrow would bring another round in their delicate dance of power and attraction, and neither was quite prepared for where it would lead. Chapter 3. Power Games. The Monaco sunset painted the Mediterranean in shades of gold and crimson as Mason's private jet touched down. He hadn't planned to attend the International Tech Innovation Gala, but the moment he'd learned Angeline would be there, his decision was made. "The dossier you requested, sir," Vincent said, handing him a leather portfolio as they descended the jet stairs. A fleet of black Mercedes waited on the tarmac. Mason opened the file, studying the latest intelligence on Angeline's movements. She'd arrived in Monaco 2 days earlier, booking the royal suite at the Hotel de Paris Monte Carlo, a $40,000 per night indulgence that made him raise an eyebrow. Their dinner at Le Jardin Privé had raised more questions than answers, and her comfortable handling of that level of luxury had only deepened his suspicions. "Sir," Vincent's voice interrupted his thoughts. "She's already at the gala." The Monte Carlo casino had been transformed for the event, its Baroque architecture enhanced by cutting-edge holographic displays showcasing the latest technological innovations. Mason adjusted his Tom Ford tuxedo as he entered, scanning the crowd for Angeline. He found her by the sound of her laugh, rich, genuine, carrying over the murmur of conversation and the soft, classical music. She stood near a quantum computing display, engaged in what appeared to be an intense technical discussion with the CEO of Europe's largest tech conglomerate. The sight of her stole his breath. She wore a gown of midnight blue that seemed to capture starlight itself, the fabric clinging to her curves before flowing to the floor like liquid night. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, adorned with a cascade of diamonds that must have cost millions. "The quantum coherence problem," she was saying as he approached, "can be solved by applying a modified version of the Schrödinger-Newton equation." The CEO, Klaus Werner, if Mason remembered correctly, was nodding enthusiastically. "Brilliant, simply brilliant. But the computational power required is already available," Angeline finished, her eyes meeting Mason's over Werner's shoulder. "Isn't that right, Mr. Matthew?" Mason felt the familiar thrill of her presence, the way she commanded attention without seeming to try. "Ms. de Sousa, I didn't expect to find you discussing quantum mechanics at a social event." Her smile held secrets. "There's a lot you don't expect about me, Mr. Matthew." Werner looked between them, his expression calculating. "You two know each other? Fascinating." Ms. de Sousa was just explaining her revolutionary approach to quantum computing, if what she's suggesting is possible. "Everything is possible," Angeline said smoothly, "with the right resources and vision." She touched Werner's arm lightly. "Would you excuse us? I believe Mr. Matthew and I have some business to discuss." Mason offered his arm, and she took it, allowing him to lead her toward the casino's private terrace. Her perfume enveloped him, something exotic and intoxicating that made his pulse quicken. "Quantum computing?" he asked as they stepped into the warm Mediterranean night. "I wasn't aware that was your area of expertise." "There's a lot you're not aware of." She moved to the terrace railing, the city lights of Monaco sparkling below like scattered diamonds. "Tell me, why did you really come to Monaco?" "Business opportunities," he lied smoothly. "Lies don't become you, Mason." It was the first time she'd used his first name, and something in her tone made him shiver. "You came because of me, because something about our dinner disturbed your carefully ordered world." He moved closer, drawn by the mystery of her. "You disturbed my carefully ordered world." "Good." She turned to face him, and in the moonlight, her beauty was almost otherworldly. "It needs disturbing." Inside, the auction portion of the gala was beginning. They returned to find the grand ballroom transformed, holographic displays showcasing the items up for bid. The first lot was a revolutionary AI chip design, estimated value $500 million. "Shall we?" Angeline's eyes sparkled with challenge. The bidding was fierce, tech giants from around the world competing for the groundbreaking technology. Mason entered the fray at $600 million, confident in his resources. Then Angeline raised her paddle. $1 billion. The room fell silent. Mason stared at her, mind racing. How could she possibly? 1.2 billion, she continued calmly, as whispers erupted around them. The auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold to Ms. de Sosa. Mason watched as she handled the transaction with practiced ease, digital signatures flying, funds transferring instantly. This was no social climber playing at wealth. This was someone who moved billions with the same casualness others spent hundreds. Surprised? She asked later, as they stood on her hotel suite's balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. Who are you really? He turned to face her, studying her features in the moonlight. Someone who's been watching you for a very long time, Mason Matthew. She moved closer, and he could hear the soft rustle of her gown, smell the intoxicating scent of her perfume. Someone who knows exactly what you're worth. And I don't mean in dollars. His heart thundered in his chest. The quantum computing patents, the AI chip. You're not just wealthy, you're the CEO of Quantum Fusion Technologies. She smiled as understanding dawned in his eyes. The company that's been buying up tech firms all over Miami. The one your analysts have been trying to investigate for months. Mason's mind raced through the implications. Quantum Fusion was worth billions, its true ownership hidden behind layers of shell companies and private trusts. They were his biggest competitor in the tech sector, the one company he couldn't seem to get a handle on. All this time, I needed to know what kind of man you really are. She reached up, straightening his bow tie with intimate familiarity. The kind who tries to buy women? Or the kind who's worth investing in? He caught her hand, holding it against his chest. She would feel his heartbeat racing beneath his tuxedo. And what's your verdict? Still deliberating. Her free hand came up to trace his jaw, and the touch sent electricity through his body. But I must admit, your $10 million offer seems rather quaint now, doesn't it? The laugh that burst from him was genuine, surprising them both. I don't know whether to be furious or impressed. Be both. She leaned closer, her lips barely brushing his ear. It makes you more interesting. The sexual tension between them was a living thing, charging the air with possibility. Mason could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could feel the warmth of her body so close to his. Dance with me, she whispered. And before he could respond, she was leading him back into the suite where soft jazz played from hidden speakers. She fit perfectly in his arms, her body moving with his as if they'd danced together 1,000 times before. The silk of her gown whispered against his tuxedo, and her scent surrounded him, making it hard to think clearly. Why the elaborate game? He asked, his voice husky with desire. Why not approach me directly? Because you needed to learn something. Her hand at the nape of his neck sent shivers down his spine. That true value isn't always measured in dollars. That real power isn't always visible. That sometimes... She pressed closer, her lips almost touching his. The hunter becomes the hunted. The kiss when it came was electric, passionate, nothing like the calculated business arrangement he'd originally proposed. Mason lost himself in the taste of her, the feel of her body against his, the soft sound she made as his hands tangled in her hair. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, she stepped back with a smile that promised everything and nothing. Good night, Mr. Matthew. I believe you have a lot to think about. He stood in her doorway, his body still humming with desire, his mind reeling from the revelations of the evening. This changes everything. No. Her smile was enigmatic. This just brings everything into the open. The real game is just beginning. As he rode the elevator down to his own suite, Mason's phone buzzed with an alert. Quantum Fusion had just announced a major acquisition of his company's main supplier. The stock would go crazy when the markets opened. He laughed out loud in the empty elevator. She'd orchestrated everything, the kiss, the revelation, the business move, with perfect precision. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly challenged. In her suite above, Angeline watched the lights of Monaco twinkle below, a glass of rare cognac in her hand. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Mason Matthew, the man who thought he could buy anything, was about to learn that some things had to be earned. The game was on, and she intended to win not just his empire, but his heart. And judging by the way he'd kissed her, that part of her plan was already well underway. Chapter 4. Dangerous Attraction. The Caribbean waters stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of turquoise and sapphire beneath the Miami sun. Mason's yacht, the $90 million Destiny's Dream, cut through the waves with elegant precision. The vessel was a masterpiece of engineering and luxury, 300 feet of pure opulence designed to impress even the most jaded billionaire. Mason stood on the upper deck, watching Angeline as she leaned against the railing, her silk sundress dancing in the warm breeze. The dress was deceptively simple, the kind of casual elegance that spoke of true wealth, and it highlighted her curves in a way that made his mouth go dry. "You're still trying to impress me," she called over her shoulder, amusement coloring her voice. "Even after Monaco." He moved closer, inhaling the subtle mix of her perfume and the salty air. The scent was intoxicating, just like everything about her. "Maybe I'm trying to impress myself." She turned to face him, and his breath caught. The sun painted golden highlights in her dark hair, and her eyes held that mysterious gleam that had haunted his dreams since their kiss in Monaco. A $2 million diamond bracelet sparkled at her wrist, his gift from their last meeting, though he now knew she could have bought it herself 100 times over. "Show me the rest," she commanded softly. He led her through the yacht's 6 levels, each deck a testament to luxury and power. The main salon, with its crystal chandelier and rare art collection, caught her attention first. She paused before a small Picasso, her fingers hovering just above the canvas. "You have excellent taste," she murmured. "This is from his blue period." "You know art?" Her smile was enigmatic. "I know many things, Mr. Matthew, including the fact that this painting was thought lost until it appeared at a private auction in Geneva last year." Mason watched her move through his collection, appreciating how her keen mind matched her beauty. She recognized pieces worth millions at a glance, commenting on their history and significance with the ease of a seasoned collector. The cinema room impressed her less, though its state-of-the-art holographic technology was worth a fortune. "Standard quantum projection," she noted, "though the neural interface is interesting." Her casual dismissal of technology worth millions confirmed what he'd suspected in Monaco. This woman's wealth ran far deeper than he'd initially believed. The infinity pool on the upper deck drew a genuine smile from her. The edge seemed to merge with the ocean itself, creating an illusion of endless water stretching to the horizon. "Now this," she said, slipping off her Louboutin heels, "is worth appreciating." Mason's throat went dry as she dipped her toes in the water. Every movement was graceful, sensual, without trying to be. The sun kissed her dark skin, making her glow like a goddess risen from the sea. "The master suite," he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended. He opened the doors to reveal a space that rivaled any luxury penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean, and a retractable glass ceiling opened to the stars above. Angeline moved to the center of the room, her fingers trailing over the silk bedding. The king-sized bed was dressed in linens that cost more than most cars, but she touched them with the casual appreciation of someone accustomed to such luxury. "Beautiful," she murmured, but she wasn't looking at the room. Her eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse race. "Why did you really invite me here?" she asked, moving closer. "More power games." "No games." His voice was husky with desire. "I needed to see you again. After Monaco... After Monaco, you spent 3 days investigating my company." Her smile held no reproach. "Finding out that I'm worth more than you are." 3.5 billion, he acknowledged, hidden behind the most brilliant corporate structure I've ever seen. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. The scent of her perfume enveloped him, making it hard to think clearly. "And does that frighten you? That I'm not what you expected?" "It terrifies me." The admission surprised them both. But not because of the money. Her hand came up to rest against his chest, and he knew she could feel his heart thundering beneath her palm. "Then why?" "Because for the first time since Rebecca's betrayal, I want something I can't control." The kiss was inevitable, magnetic. Her lips met his with a passion that matched his own, and suddenly the world narrowed to this moment, this woman. His hands tangled in her hair as hers worked at the buttons of his shirt, and every touch was electric. The setting sun painted the room in shades of gold and crimson as clothing fell away. Mason's breath caught at the sight of her nude form, all elegant curves and smooth skin that seemed to glow in the dying light. Her heart beat a rapid rhythm against his chest as he pulled her close, lost in the intoxicating scent of her perfume and the taste of her skin. "Mason," she whispered against his neck, and his name on her lips was both prayer and command. They moved together, as if they'd known each other's bodies for lifetimes, every touch igniting new fires. Later, as they lay tangled in silk sheets beneath the stars, Mason traced patterns on her bare shoulder. The glass ceiling above them revealed a canvas of stars, nature's diamonds scattered across black velvet. "This changes everything," he said softly. Everything was already changing. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the moonlight. "The question is, are you ready for what comes next?" "What does come next?" Instead of answering, she rose from the bed, magnificent in her nudity, and moved to the window. The moonlight silvered her skin, creating an image he knew would be forever burned in his memory. "Your board meeting tomorrow," she said finally. "They're planning to vote on the Asian expansion." Mason sat up, suddenly alert. The sheet pooled around his waist as he watched her, admiring how she could shift from passionate lover to brilliant businesswoman in an instant. "How did you—" "Because I own 30% of the companies you're planning to acquire." She turned to face him, and there was nothing soft about her expression now. Through shell corporations, of course. The business implications hit him like a physical blow. "You've been positioning yourself against my expansion plans." "No." She moved back to the bed, her grace hypnotic. "I've been positioning myself to help you. If you're willing to trust me..." Trust. The word hung between them like a challenge. Mason reached for her, pulling her back into his arms, needing to feel the reality of her. "Why?" he demanded. "Why go to all this trouble?" She straddled him, her hands framing his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. The moonlight caught the tears in her eyes, adding depth to her words. "Because sometimes, the only way to heal a broken heart is to risk breaking it again." The truth of her words resonated deep within him. As she kissed him again, Mason realized he was falling, not just into passion, but into something far more dangerous. The night deepened around them as they lost themselves in each other again and again. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word built something new between them, something that transcended their power games and carefully laid plans. Dawn found them on the yacht's private deck, wrapped in silk robes, watching the sun rise over the Caribbean. Angeline sat between his legs, her back against his chest, both of them cradling cups of rare Kopi Luwak coffee. "My board meeting is in 4 hours," Mason said, nuzzling her neck. "I know." She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart skip. "And I'll be there. As my competitor or my ally?" Her smile was mysterious. "That depends entirely on you, Mr. Matthew. Are you ready to admit that some things are worth more than money?" Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with urgent messages. The Asian markets had just opened, and something big was happening with the companies he planned to acquire. Angeline stood, letting her robe fall away as she moved toward the master suite. "You should probably check those messages," she called over her shoulder. "The game isn't quite over yet." Mason watched her go, his body still humming with desire, his mind racing with possibilities. In less than 24 hours, everything had changed. The woman he'd thought to buy with millions had turned out to be worth billions, not just in money, but in the way she challenged everything he thought he knew about power, control, and trust. As he followed her back to the bedroom, he realized that for the first time in years, he was truly excited about what the future might hold. The game might not be over, but the rules had definitely changed. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what he needed. Chapter 5. The Test. The Matthew Industries boardroom hummed with tension as Mason studied the holographic displays floating above the polished mahogany table. Market projections, acquisition targets, and competitor analyses shimmered in the air like digital constellations. But his attention kept drifting to Angeline, who sat at the far end of the table, commanding the room's attention with her quiet authority. "The Singapore merger is our primary concern," his CFO was saying. "With the Asian markets in flux, the merger is a distraction." Angeline interrupted smoothly. "The real opportunity is in quantum integration." Mason watched her as she stood, moving to manipulate the holographic display with practiced ease. Her cream silk suit emphasized every curve while maintaining absolute professionalism, and her presence made every other person in the room feel somehow diminished. "If we combine Matthew Industries' manufacturing capabilities with Quantum Fusion's processing architecture," she continued, "we could revolutionize the entire tech sector." The board members leaned forward, captivated. Mason could see the dollar signs in their eyes as Angeline laid out her vision. But something nagged at him. It was all too perfect, too precisely calculated, just like their night on the yacht. "Interesting proposal," he said finally. "Let's take a break to consider the implications." As the board members filed out, Angeline remained, her dark eyes meeting his across the room. "You're planning something. What makes you say that?" She moved closer, the click of her heels on marble echoing in the empty boardroom. "Because I know you, Mason Matthew. You don't trust anything that seems too good to be true." He caught her hand, pulling her closer. "Can you blame me?" "No." Her free hand came up to trace his jaw, sending electricity through his body. "But your test, whatever it is, I hope you're prepared for the results." Before he could respond, she kissed him briefly, then turned and walked out, leaving him with the lingering scent of her perfume and a growing sense of anticipation. That evening, Mason set his plan in motion. A leaked email suggesting Matthew Industries was about to announce a revolutionary breakthrough in quantum computing, the kind of information that could send stock prices soaring or crashing if someone knew it was false. "The bait is set," Vincent reported. "If she's planning to profit from insider information, she'll make her move tonight," Mason finished. He sat in his home office, surrounded by screens monitoring global market activity. One screen showed Angeline entering her penthouse at the Four Seasons, looking as composed as ever. Hours passed. The Asian markets opened. European trading began. Mason watched, waiting for any sign that Angeline was using the false information. His phone buzzed at midnight. A message from her. "Your office." Now, he found her waiting in his darkened office, silhouetted against the Miami skyline. She wore a red dress that made his mouth go dry, but her expression was pure business. "Elegant," she said without turning. The leaked email, the carefully planned trading windows, the multiple ways I could have profited from the information. Now she faced him, and her smile held a predatory edge. "Did you really think I wouldn't see through it?" Mason moved closer, drawn by the dangerous gleam in her eyes. "I had to know." "Know what?" "If I could be trusted." She laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. "Mason, if I wanted to take advantage of you, I would have done it when I bought controlling interest in your Asian subsidiaries." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. "What?" She moved to his desk, pulling up financial records on his holographic display. 3 months ago, through a series of shell companies. I could have forced the merger then, but I wanted to earn your trust, not take it. Mason stared at the evidence floating before him. She'd had the power to destroy him for months, but instead... "Why?" he demanded, moving to grip her shoulders. "Why go through all this?" "Because I needed to know if you were worth saving." She reached up to touch his face, her eyes softening. "Your ex-wife's betrayal nearly destroyed you, Mason. You've spent 3 years building walls so high that nothing real could get through, but I saw something in you worth fighting for." The truth of her words resonated deep within him. Without conscious thought, he pulled her closer, claiming her mouth in a kiss that was both passion and punishment. She met his intensity with her own, her body molding to his as if they were made for each other. The dress whispered to the floor, followed by his suit. In the darkness of his office, with the city lights sparkling below, they came together with an urgency that bordered on desperation. Her skin was silk beneath his hands, her heartbeat a rapid rhythm against his chest. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word built something new between them, something that transcended their power games and carefully laid plans. Later, as they lay tangled together on the leather sofa, Mason traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "You could have ruined me." "Yes." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the city's glow. "Just like you could have ruined me with that fake insider information. But we both chose something else." "Trust," he said softly, "the beginning of it." She kissed him gently, then rose, magnificent in her nudity, to retrieve her dress. "But we still have a long way to go." As she dressed, Mason watched her with new eyes. Every graceful movement, every confident gesture spoke of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. "Stay," he said impulsively. Her smile was tender but firm. "Not tonight. You need time to process what happened here, to decide if you're really ready for what comes next." "And what is that?" She paused at the door, looking back at him with an expression that made his heart skip. "A partnership, in every sense of the word, but only if you're brave enough to tear down those walls you've built." After she left, Mason stood at his window, watching the Miami night. The test he'd planned had backfired spectacularly, revealing not her character but his own fears and doubts. His phone buzzed with a message from Vincent. "Sir, you should see this." The attached files showed something remarkable. During the hours they'd spent together, Angeline had used her tech resources to protect Matthew Industries from a real corporate raid attempt. She'd quietly blocked hostile trades, rerouted potential threats, and strengthened their market position, all while he was testing her integrity. Mason laughed out loud in his empty office. She'd known about his test from the beginning, had probably planned for it, but instead of being angry, she'd turned it into an opportunity to prove something far more valuable than her trustworthiness. She'd proven that she was already fighting for him, for them, even when he couldn't see it. Dawn found him still in his office, watching the sun rise over Miami. The world looked different somehow, as if the light had changed while he wasn't watching, or maybe he was the one who had changed. His phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Angeline. Breakfast. I know a lovely place that serves trust issues with their coffee. For the first time in 3 years, Mason Matthew felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever: hope. The game wasn't over, but the stakes had changed. Now they were playing for something far more valuable than money or power. They were playing for the chance at real love. Chapter 6. Storms and Shelter. The Miami morning erupted with headlines that sent shockwaves through the business world. Tech titans in love, Matthew and DeSosa merger rocks Wall Street. Power couple worth $20 billion combined. Inside the romance that could reshape global tech. Mason stood in his penthouse kitchen, scrolling through the news on his tablet while rare Kona coffee brewed. The smell of jasmine and vanilla told him Angeline was awake before he felt her arms slide around his waist. Regretting letting the world know, she murmured against his back. He turned to face her, his breath catching as it did every morning. She wore one of his dress shirts, the white silk emphasizing her dark skin. Her hair fell in natural waves around her face, and without makeup, she was even more beautiful. Never, he said, pulling her closer. Though my PR team might be having collective heart attacks, mine too. She reached for his coffee, taking a sip. The board meeting should be interesting. That was an understatement. In the week since their relationship had become public, Matthew Industries' stock had jumped 15%. Quantum Fusion's value had increased even more. The business world was obsessed with their romance, but something deeper was happening beneath the surface. Mason, she said softly, setting down the coffee. We need to talk about something. His body tensed automatically, years of defensive instincts kicking in. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, Miami spread out below like a glittering jewel box. But do you remember your original proposition? The $10 million offer that had started everything. It felt like a lifetime ago. How could I forget? She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart race. You wanted an heir, a legacy. Mason's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Angeline, I'm not pregnant, she said quickly, but I want to know if that's still what you want. An heir, a family. He set down his cup, moving to join her at the window. The morning sun painted her skin in gold, and he couldn't resist touching her face. What I wanted then and what I want now are very different things, he said carefully. Then I wanted a business transaction, a way to ensure my empire survived without risking my heart. And now, he pulled her closer, inhaling the scent that was uniquely her. Now I want everything, a partnership, a future, and yes, maybe someday a family, but not because of business or legacy, because of love. The kiss was slow, deep, full of promise. Her body melted into his, and the world beyond their embrace ceased to exist, until his phone buzzed with urgent messages. The board, she murmured against his lips. We're late. Let them wait. But duty called, and an hour later they walked into Matthew Industries' boardroom together. The reaction was immediate. Board members who had known Mason for decades stared openly at the way he held Angeline's hand, at the intimate glances they shared. The merger proposal, Mason began, but his CFO interrupted. Before we discuss business, Howard Bennett said, his tone carefully neutral, Perhaps we should address the personal aspects of this situation. Angeline's hand tightened in Mason's. By personal aspects, you mean our relationship. The board has concerns, another member spoke up, about the mixing of business and pleasure. Mason felt anger rising, but Angeline's voice cut through the tension like a blade. When Mason's ex-wife betrayed him, she said calmly, this board did nothing. When she and his CFO nearly destroyed this company, you all looked the other way, and now you have concerns. The room fell silent. Mason watched in awe as she stood, commanding attention without raising her voice. I own 30% of this company's Asian subsidiaries, she continued. I could have forced this merger months ago. Instead, I chose to earn trust, to build something real. She smiled, and there was steel beneath the sweetness. So yes, Mason and I are in love. And yes, we're merging our companies. The only question is whether you want to be part of the largest tech empire in history, or if you'd prefer to resign and watch from the sidelines. The silence stretched for a heartbeat, then two. Finally, Howard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should review the merger proposal. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of presentations and projections, but Mason couldn't take his eyes off Angeline. She was magnificent, handling complex technical questions while subtly reminding everyone of her power. That evening, they escaped to his yacht, seeking refuge from the media storm. The Caribbean sunset painted the sky in shades of fire as they stood on the upper deck. You were incredible today, Mason said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest. I meant every word about earning trust, building something real. He turned her to face him, needing to see her eyes. I know, just like I meant what I said this morning, about wanting everything. Her smile was radiant as she began unbuttoning his shirt. Show me. They made love under the stars, their passion heightened by the day's battles. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a declaration. Her heart beat against his chest like a drum, her skin glowing in the moonlight as she moved above him. Later, wrapped in silk sheets in the master suite, Angeline traced patterns on his chest. The media's calling us the ultimate power couple, she said softly. Let them talk. He pulled her closer. They don't understand what this really is. And what is it? Destiny. The word surprised them both. Everything in my life, the success, the betrayal, the pain, it was all leading me to you. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. Mason Matthew, are you becoming a romantic? Only with you. He kissed her deeply, feeling her smile against his lips. The night deepened around them as they lay together, planning their future in whispered conversations. The merger would reshape the tech world. Their combined power would be unprecedented. But in the quiet moments between strategies and dreams, they both knew that the real miracle wasn't their business success. It was the way they'd found each other, how a $10 million proposition had led to something priceless. As they drifted off to sleep, Miami's lights twinkling in the distance, Mason held Angeline close and finally admitted the truth to himself. He wasn't just falling in love with her. He was already there. Chapter 7. The Confession. The storm that swept over Miami that night matched Mason's turbulent thoughts as he stood in his private office, staring at the evidence spread across his holographic displays. Lightning illuminated the city skyline, casting sharp shadows across the damning documents Vincent had just delivered. Each flash revealed another layer of betrayal, another piece of a conspiracy that had nearly destroyed him. When did you find this? He asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. The crystal tumbler of rare scotch in his hand caught the light, amber liquid trembling with his barely suppressed rage. This morning. Vincent moved closer to the displays, enlarging one particular document. The hologram cast a blue glow across his grave features. Angeline's team has been investigating your ex-wife for over a year, long before she ever met you. Mason's eyes traced the intricate web of connections Angeline had uncovered. Bank transfers, secret meetings, encrypted communications, all pointing to one inescapable truth. Rebecca's betrayal hadn't been a crime of opportunity. It had been planned from the beginning, a calculated strike at his heart and empire alike. She has surveillance photos from before your daughter's diagnosis, Vincent continued softly, his voice gentle as he delivered the crushing revelation. Rebecca and James were planning to take control of the company months before Sarah died. Mason's voice cracked on his daughter's name. The pain, even 3 years later, was still raw. The scotch burned his throat as he drained the glass, but nothing could burn away the memory of those final days in the hospital. Another document expanded before him, and his hand tightened on the empty glass. The timestamp showed Rebecca meeting with corporate raiders while he'd been at the hospital, holding their dying daughter's hand. She'd been plotting his destruction while he'd been watching their child slip away. The intercom chimed softly. "Sir," Sophia's voice was apologetic, understanding the weight of the moment. "Ms. de Sosa is here." Mason's heart thundered in his chest. Of course she would come. She always seemed to know exactly when he needed her, even before he knew it himself. "Send her in." Angeline entered like a force of nature, her presence immediately filling the room. She wore a simple black dress that emphasized her curves while maintaining absolute elegance, but it was her expression that caught his breath, concern mixed with determination and something deeper that made his heart ache. "You found it," she said quietly, moving toward him with the grace that had first captured his attention. "Why?" The question burst from him, raw with emotion. Why investigate all this? Why dig into wounds that were finally starting to heal? She moved closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The storm outside cast dramatic shadows across her face as lightning flashed. "Because I needed to understand what broke you, what made a man like you think love could be bought and sold like stocks." "You knew." His hands clenched at his sides. "All this time, you knew what they'd done." "Yes." She reached for him, but he stepped back, needing distance to process this revelation. "Was any of it real?" he demanded, gesturing between them. "Or was this all part of your investigation? Another corporate takeover dressed up as romance?" Her eyes flashed dangerously, and the power that had built her own empire crackled in the air between them. "Don't you dare question what's between us." She moved closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Yes, I investigated your past. Yes, I uncovered their plot, but falling in love with you..." Her voice softened, filled with an emotion that couldn't be faked. That was never part of the plan. The tension between them was electric, charged with anger and passion and something deeper. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, nature's percussion matching the drama unfolding in the penthouse office. "Show me everything," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. For the next hour, Angeline laid out the full scope of her investigation. Her brilliant mind had traced every thread of Rebecca's conspiracy, uncovered every hidden connection. The holographic displays filled with evidence as she revealed how his ex-wife and former CFO had plotted his destruction while presenting a perfect facade of family unity. "They knew you'd be too devastated to notice the signs," she explained, pulling up more documents. The blue light of the holograms painted patterns across her dark skin as she moved through the evidence. "They counted on your pain blinding you." Mason's hand trembled as he touched a holographic image of a bank statement. $200 million transferred the day Sarah died. "While you were at the hospital," Angeline's voice was gentle but firm. They used your daughter's death as cover for their biggest move. The rage that had been building inside him suddenly exploded. Mason swept his arm across his desk, sending papers flying, crystal decanter shattering against the wall. They used my daughter. Yes. Angeline caught his hands, forcing him to focus on her. Her touch was electric, grounding. But I found the proof, all of it, enough to destroy them completely. Why didn't you use it? Why wait? Her eyes softened as she framed his face with her hands. Because you needed to heal first, to learn to trust again, to remember how to love. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the scent that had become home to him. The storm raged outside, but in his arms was shelter, understanding, strength. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her skin, "for doubting you." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her hands still framing his face. "Never apologize for protecting your heart. But know this, Mason Matthew. I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with it." The kiss was inevitable, passionate, healing. Her body melted into his as his hands tangled in her hair, the silk of her dress whispering against his suit. The storm outside intensified, but neither noticed as clothing fell away and skin met skin. He lifted her onto his desk, documents scattering, holograms flickering as they came together with desperate need. Her heartbeat thundered against his chest, matching his own frantic rhythm. Every touch was both comfort and claiming, every kiss both absolution and promise. Later, as they lay tangled together on the leather sofa, the storm beginning to fade, Angeline traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "There's more," she said softly, her voice holding both determination and compassion. "More?" She rose, magnificent in her nudity, to retrieve her tablet from her discarded purse. The city lights painted patterns across her skin as she moved through the darkened office. "I found Sarah's medical records, the experimental treatment that could have saved her. Rebecca blocked it." Mason sat up, shock coursing through him. "What?" "She convinced the hospital board to deny the treatment, said you wouldn't pay for experimental procedures." Angeline's voice shook with controlled rage. She knew the treatment might save Sarah, but a healthy daughter would have complicated their plans. The truth hit him like a physical blow. All this time, he'd blamed himself for not finding a way to save his daughter. But Rebecca had actively worked against Sarah's survival, had chosen money over an innocent child's life. "I'll destroy them," he said, his voice deadly calm. "We'll destroy them," Angeline corrected, moving to straddle his lap. Her skin glowed in the lightning flashes as the storm returned. "Together. But first, you need to let go of the guilt. Sarah's death wasn't your fault. You were a father fighting for his daughter while vipers plotted around you." Tears he'd held back for 3 years finally fell as Angeline held him, her strength becoming his shelter. They stayed that way for a long time, the storm outside finally giving way to dawn. As the first rays of sun painted Miami in gold, Mason pulled back to study Angeline's face. "You saved me, not just with this information, but with your love." Her smile was radiant as she wiped away his tears. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to love again. I just showed you it was worth the risk." They made love again as the sun rose, slower this time, every touch an affirmation of trust and healing. Her body moved with his in perfect harmony, their hearts beating as one, their souls connecting on a level that transcended physical passion. Afterward, as they dressed for the day ahead, Mason caught Angeline's hand. "Marry me." She froze, her eyes wide. The morning light caught the tear that slipped down her cheek. "Mason... ... Not for business, not for legacy, not for any reason except that I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Her smile could have lit up the city. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. As they kissed, sealing their commitment to each other, both knew that this was just the beginning. They had enemies to face, empires to merge, and a future to build. But they would do it together, their love forged in the fire of truth and strengthened by the storms they'd weathered. The sun rose over Miami, promising a new day and a new beginning for them both. And somewhere, Mason liked to think, Sarah was smiling down on them, knowing her father had finally found not just love, but redemption. Chapter 8. Empire Building. The Singapore skyline glittered like diamonds, scattered across black velvet as Mason and Angeline stood in their penthouse suite at the Marina Bay Sands. The infinity pool behind them reflected starlight, and the warm night air carried the scent of tropical flowers. "The Asian markets open in an hour," Angeline said, checking her diamond watch. She wore a red silk cheongsam that hugged every curve, designed specifically for tonight's merger announcement. "Are you ready?" Mason pulled her closer, inhaling the intoxicating mix of her perfume and the night-blooming jasmine. "With you by my side?" "Always." The past month had been a whirlwind of negotiations, strategic planning, and secret meetings. Their engagement announcement had sent shockwaves through the business world, but that was nothing compared to what was coming. "Mr. Matthew," Vincent's voice came through the secure comm system. "The board members are assembled in the conference room." Mason took Angeline's hand, feeling the perfect fit of her engagement ring, a rare blue diamond that had cost more than most people's lifetime earnings. "Shall we change the world, my love?" Her smile was both tender and predatory. "Let's make history." The conference room occupied the entire 57th floor of Singapore's most exclusive business tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, while holographic displays showed real-time market data from every major exchange in the world. As they entered together, the assembled board members rose. These were the most powerful people in global tech, and they all knew something momentous was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mason began, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. "Tonight, we're not just announcing a merger, we're announcing a revolution." Angeline moved to the central holographic display, her presence commanding attention. The integration of Matthew Industries' manufacturing capabilities with Quantum Fusion's processing architecture is just the beginning. The next hour was a masterclass in corporate strategy as they laid out their vision. Quantum computing facilities in every major city, revolutionary AI integration, medical technology that would save millions of lives. "The combined value of our companies post-merger," Angeline concluded, "will exceed $100 billion. The room erupted in excited murmurs, but Mason wasn't watching the board members. His eyes were fixed on Angeline, marveling at how she commanded the room, how her brilliant mind matched his step for step. "There's more," he said, stepping forward. The room fell silent. "This merger isn't just about business, it's about legacy." He nodded to Vincent, who activated a new holographic display. The image that appeared made several board members gasp. "The Sarah Matthew Foundation for Medical Innovation," Angeline announced softly. $20 billion in initial funding, dedicated to developing treatments for rare genetic conditions. Mason's voice was thick with emotion as he continued. "Every child deserves a chance at life. Every parent deserves hope. This foundation will ensure that no family has to go through what I did." The board's approval was unanimous. As the members filed out to prepare for the market opening, Mason pulled Angeline into his private office, adjacent to the conference room. "That was incredible," he murmured, pushing her against the door. "You're incredible." Her laugh turned into a gasp as his lips found her neck. "Mason, The markets open in 20 minutes. Plenty of time. His hand slid over the silk of her dress, feeling the heat of her skin beneath. I need you. Now. The kiss was explosive, passionate, full of the energy that had been building all evening. Her fingers made quick work of his tie as his found the hidden zipper of her dress. The silk whispered to the floor, revealing black lace that made his breath catch. Beautiful, he whispered, drinking in the sight of her. The city lights painted patterns on her dark skin, and her eyes held both love and desire. Their coming together was urgent, primal. Her heartbeat thundered against his chest as he lifted her onto his desk, market data forgotten as they lost themselves in each other. Every touch was electric, every kiss a promise of forever. Later, as they straightened their clothes and checked their appearances, Angeline caught Mason's hand. I have something to tell you. His heart skipped. What is it? She placed his hand on her stomach, her smile radiant. I'm pregnant. The world seemed to stop. We're going to have a baby. Happy tears sparkled in her eyes. I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait until after the merger announcement, but Mason pulled her into his arms, his own eyes wet. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. The markets forgotten. They held each other as the Singapore night deepened around them. Everything they'd built, the empire, the foundation, their love, now had new meaning. Vincent's voice broke the moment. Sir, 1 minute to market open. They moved to the main conference room's wall of screens, hand in hand. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. I love you, Mason whispered. I love you too, Angeline replied, squeezing his hand. 3, 2, 1. The markets exploded. Their stock prices soared as news of the merger spread, billions in value created in seconds as their vision became reality. But Mason and Angeline barely noticed. They were lost in each other's eyes, their hearts beating in sync, their future stretching out before them like a road paved with starlight. Mrs. Matthew, he murmured, loving how the name sounded. Her smile was brighter than all of Singapore's lights. Not yet, but soon. The night deepened as they worked together, guiding their new empire through its first hours. Board members came and went, reports were filed, decisions made. But through it all, they remained connected, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Dawn found them on their penthouse balcony, watching the sun rise over the city they'd just transformed. Angeline leaned back against Mason's chest, his hands protectively covering her stomach. What are you thinking? She asked softly. That I'm the luckiest man alive. He kissed her neck. When I made that $10 million offer, I thought I was buying a simple solution. Instead, I found everything I never knew I needed. She turned in his arms. We found each other, and now we're building something greater than either of us could have imagined. An empire, he agreed. A family, she corrected. Their kiss was tender, full of promise for the future they would build together. As the sun rose over Singapore, painting the world in gold, Mason Matthew held his entire world in his arms and knew that no amount of money could have bought this kind of happiness. It had to be earned through trust and love and the courage to believe in second chances. The empire they were building would change the world. But the love they shared had already changed theirs. Chapter 9, The Storm. The Miami Herald's headline screamed across every digital billboard in the city. Matthew Industries rocked by scandal. Ex-wife claims current engagement is corporate conspiracy. Mason stood in his office, watching the media frenzy unfold on multiple screens. Rebecca's carefully orchestrated interview was playing on every major network. Her practiced tears and calculated accusations designed for maximum impact. She's been planning this, Vincent reported, bringing up surveillance data. The timing isn't random. 3 days before our wedding, Mason said quietly, his hands clenched on the desk. She waited until everything was perfect. The door opened and Angeline entered like a force of nature. 4 months pregnant, she radiated both power and beauty in a cream designer dress that highlighted her growing bump. Her face showed no trace of the morning sickness that had plagued her earlier. "Cancel nothing," she said immediately, moving to Mason's side. "Not the wedding, not the merger announcement, not a single plan." He pulled her close, drawing strength from her presence. "She's claiming you orchestrated everything, that our relationship is a corporate takeover in disguise." "Of course she is." Angeline's smile held steel. "Because that's exactly what she tried to do to you." The screen showed Rebecca giving another interview, her designer suit and perfect makeup a stark contrast to her tearful performance. "I'm just trying to protect Mason," she was saying. "This woman has systematically positioned herself to take control of everything he's built." Mason felt Angeline tense against him. "She's good," she admitted, playing the concerned ex-wife while implying I'm doing exactly what she did. "The difference," Mason said, turning her to face him, "is that I know the truth. About everything." Their kiss was brief but powerful, a reminder of all they'd built together. When they parted, Angeline's eyes held a dangerous gleam. "Let's end this," she said, "once and for all." The next hour was a masterclass in strategic warfare as they laid out their counterattack. Angeline's tech team had been monitoring Rebecca's activities for months, gathering evidence of her latest schemes. "She's working with North Star Tech," Vincent reported, bringing up financial records. "They're trying to destabilize our stock before the merger." "Classic move," Angeline mused, one hand absently caressing her belly. "Create scandal, drive down the stock price, swoop in for a hostile takeover." Mason watched her work, marveling at how her brilliant mind dissected the threat. She was magnificent, her pregnancy adding a glow to her natural beauty that took his breath away. "The press conference is in an hour," Sophia announced through the intercom. "The major networks are all carrying it live." Angeline stood, smoothing her dress. "Time to remind Miami who they're dealing with." They made their way to the Matthew Industries press room, hands linked, presenting a united front. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as they took the stage. 3 years ago, Angeline began without preamble. Rebecca Williams, then Rebecca Matthew, conspired with James to steal control of this company. The room erupted in questions, but she continued, her voice carrying over the chaos. "We have proof, not just of their original plot, but of their current attempt to manipulate the market." Mason stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "My ex-wife claims to be protecting me. The truth is, she blocked medical treatment that could have saved our daughter's life, all to further her own agenda." The evidence appeared on the massive screens behind them, bank records, surveillance photos, encrypted communications. The story unfolded in damning detail. "Ms. Williams," Angeline concluded, her hand protectively over her stomach, "you tried to destroy the father of my child once before. Never again." The press conference exploded into a feeding frenzy as the implications sank in. Mason led Angeline off the stage and into their private elevator. The moment the doors closed, he pulled her into his arms. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. She melted into him, her body fitting perfectly against his. "Show me." They barely made it to his office. Clothes fell away as passion overtook them, need overwhelming everything else. Her heartbeat thundered against his chest as he lifted her onto his desk, market reports scattering unnoticed. "Beautiful," he breathed, drinking in the sight of her. Pregnancy had made her even more stunning, her curves more lush, her skin glowing. The afternoon sun painted patterns on her dark skin as she moved beneath him. Their lovemaking was both tender and desperate, a reaffirmation of everything they meant to each other. Every touch was electric, every kiss a promise that nothing could tear them apart. Later, as they lay tangled together on the leather sofa, Angeline's head on his chest, Mason's phone buzzed with urgent messages. "Rebecca's being investigated by the SEC," he reported, scrolling through updates. "North Star's CEO just resigned. Our stock is up 12%. Angeline laughed softly. "And to think you once thought $10 million could buy what we have." He kissed her deeply, tasting the sweetness of her smile. "Best failed transaction of my life." The Miami sunset painted the sky in shades of fire as they stood together at the window, watching their empire weather another storm. Angeline's engagement ring caught the light, the blue diamond sending sparkles across the walls. "One more thing," she said, pulling up data on her tablet. "I found something interesting in Rebecca's private communications." Mason read the encrypted messages, his jaw tightening. "She's been working with someone inside the company. Someone with access to our merger plans." "Yes." Angeline's smile was predatory. "And tomorrow we're going to find out who." As night fell over Miami, they worked together, planning their next moves. The betrayal from within their ranks would be dealt with, just as Rebecca's schemes had been exposed. But for now, in the quiet darkness of his office, Mason held his pregnant fiancée close and marveled at how complete his life had become. The storms would come and go, but their love was stronger than any tempest. "Marry me tomorrow," he said suddenly. Angeline turned in his arms, surprise in her eyes. "The planned ceremony isn't for 3 days." "I don't want to wait. We'll keep the public ceremony for appearances, but let's make it official tomorrow. Just us on the yacht under the stars." Her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of forever. Outside, Miami glittered like a jewel box, unaware that its most powerful couple had just emerged stronger from another attempt to tear them apart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight belonged to them, to their love, to the family they were building and the empire they'd forged together. Chapter 10. The Choice. The Hong Kong skyline shimmered through the morning haze as Mason paced his penthouse office at the International Commerce Center. The view from the 118th floor usually calmed him, but today nothing could ease the weight of the decision before him. In the glass reflection, he could see the holographic displays floating behind him, each one detailing the billions he stood to lose. "The Chinese government's terms are non-negotiable," Vincent reported, his voice grave. A dossier materialized in the air between them, characters in Mandarin scrolling alongside English translations. "Either you end the merger with Quantum Fusion or they block Matthew Industries from Asian markets entirely." Mason's hand tightened on his Macallan 50-year-old Scotch, the crystal catching the morning light. 5 months pregnant, Angeline was in Singapore, finalizing their quantum computing patents. She didn't know about the ultimatum yet. "How did they find out?" he demanded, his voice carrying the edge that had made him feared in boardrooms across the globe. "The leak came from inside." Vincent brought up surveillance footage on the holographic display. "Howard Bennett has been feeding information to Beijing for months. The betrayal from his own CFO stung, but not as much as the choice it forced. Asian markets represented 60% of Matthew Industries' future growth. Losing them would cost billions, possibly destabilize the entire company." "Sir," Vincent said softly, his expression unusually hesitant. "There's more. The pregnancy." Mason's head snapped up, his body tensing. "What about it?" "Bennett leaked medical records. Proof that Angeline is carrying a boy. The Chinese government knows your son would inherit both companies. They're calling it a national security concern." "A son?" Mason's heart clenched as his hand unconsciously moved to touch the photo of Angeline on his desk. They'd wanted to be surprised, had deliberately avoided learning the baby's gender. Now, this most precious secret had been weaponized against them. His secure phone buzzed. Angeline. He took a deep breath, inhaling the rare oud wood incense that perfumed his office, before answering. "You know," she said simply. No greeting, no preamble needed. "I just found out myself." He moved to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Far below, Hong Kong's traffic flowed like arteries of a living city. "Mason." Her voice held no fear, only steel. "Whatever you're thinking, stop. We can find another way. They'll destroy everything I've built." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. "Everything I wanted to leave our son. Our son needs his father's integrity more than his money." The conviction in her voice made his throat tight. "A legacy isn't just about wealth, Mason. It's about the choices we make when everything is on the line." God, he loved her. Even now, facing the potential collapse of their business empire, she thought of values over wealth. She'd transformed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "Come to Hong Kong," he said suddenly, needing her presence like air. "I need you here." Already on the way, the jet lands in an hour. He met her at the private airfield. The sight of her stealing his breath as it always did. Pregnancy had only enhanced her beauty, adding a glow to her dark skin and a fuller curve to her body. She wore a deep blue maternity dress by a Parisian designer that made her look like a queen, and the way she moved down the jet stairs was pure grace. "You're staring," she said as she reached him, her smile knowing. "You're beautiful." He pulled her close, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their son grew. "Both of you." Their kiss was tender, healing, a reminder of what really mattered. When they parted, her eyes held both love and determination. "Now," she said, "show me what we're dealing with." Back in his office, they reviewed the evidence together. Howard's betrayal, the government's threats, the potential fallout. Angeline absorbed it all with the brilliant analytical mind that had built her own empire. "They're afraid," she said finally, manipulating the holographic displays with practiced ease. "Not of our business merger, but of what our son represents. A true union of East and West, heir to the most powerful tech empire in history." "The timing was deliberate," Mason agreed, watching her work. "Waiting until you're too far along to hide it, until the merger is almost complete. Until they could force you to choose between your company and your family." She turned to him, backlit by the Hong Kong skyline, a vision of power and grace. "But they've made a crucial mistake." "What's that?" Her smile was predatory. "They assumed you're still the man who thought he could buy love for $10 million. He moved to her, drawn by the fire in her eyes. "I'm not that man anymore." "No." She touched his face gently. "You're so much more. Now let's make them regret backing us into a corner." The next hours were a masterclass in corporate warfare. Angeline's tech team worked with Mason's strategists, restructuring their Asian holdings through a maze of shell companies and proxy corporations. "The quantum computing patents," Angeline said suddenly, her hands dancing through the holographic displays. "They're the key." Mason watched as she pulled up complex technical documents. "How?" "Because quantum supremacy changes everything. With our breakthrough, traditional security measures become obsolete. The Chinese government isn't afraid of our business, they're afraid of our technology." Understanding dawned. If we announce the breakthrough, every major power will be forced to work with us, regardless of their political agenda. Her smile was triumphant. They can block our old tech, but they can't afford to be left behind in the quantum race. As they worked through the night, Mason found himself constantly distracted by her. The way she commanded the room, her brilliant mind matching his step for step. The protective way she cradled their unborn son while issuing strategic directives. The fire in her eyes as she fought for their shared future. Dawn found them alone in his office, watching the sun rise over Victoria Harbour. Angeline leaned back against his chest, his hands resting on their child. "I felt him move," Mason whispered in wonder as their son kicked against his palm. "He knows his father's touch." She turned in his arms, and her beauty in the morning light made his heart ache. "He knows you'll always choose love over fear." Their kiss was deep, passionate, full of promise. Her heartbeat thundered against his chest as clothing fell away, need overwhelming everything else. Making love as the sun rose over Hong Kong, they reaffirmed their commitment to each other and the future they would build together. Later, as they dressed for the press conference that would change everything, Mason caught her hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For showing me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars." He touched her face gently. "For giving me a son, for making me brave enough to choose love." Her smile was radiant as she straightened his tie. "Ready to shake the world, Mr. Matthew. With you by my side, always, Mrs. Matthew." The press conference was a global event. Every major network carried their announcement live as they revealed the quantum computing breakthrough that would revolutionize technology forever. But Mason barely noticed the world's reaction. His eyes were fixed on Angeline as she commanded the stage, her brilliant mind and indomitable spirit shining through every word. Their unborn son moved beneath his hand as he stood beside her, and in that moment he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Love over fear, family over fortune, trust over power. The empire they were building would change the world, but the family they were creating would change eternity. As they left the stage to thunderous applause, Mason pulled Angeline close. "I would choose you every time," he whispered against her hair. Her eyes sparkled with tears and triumph. "You already did. That's why we won." High above Hong Kong, their empires merged and their hearts beat as one, while their son kicked strongly between them. A reminder that the greatest power isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the courage to choose love over everything else. Chapter 11. Legacy. The sunset painted Miami's skyline in shades of gold and rose as Mason stood in the newly completed penthouse of the Matthew de Sousa Tower. At 90 stories, it was now the city's tallest building, a testament to the merged power of their empires. But his attention was fixed on Angeline, 7 months pregnant and more beautiful than ever, as she directed the placement of a rare Monet. "A little to the left," she called to the art handlers, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built her empire. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, where their son had been particularly active today. The blue silk maternity gown she wore was custom designed by Paris's most exclusive atelier, emphasizing both her pregnancy and her elegance. "You should be resting," Mason said, moving to wrap his arms around her from behind. The scent of her perfume mingled with the fresh paint and new leather of their penthouse, creating a scent that meant home. She leaned back against him, sighing contentedly. "Our son appreciates fine art. Feel how he moves when the light hits the painting just right." Mason's hands covered hers on their child, and sure enough, he felt a strong kick. The wonder of it still took his breath away, even after months of experiencing these moments. Their son seemed to respond to beauty, to power, to the energy that flowed between his parents. The Sarah Matthew Foundation opens tomorrow, he murmured against her hair, inhaling the jasmine scent that had become his favorite in the world. Everything's ready. She turned in his arms, her dark eyes shining with pride. The research facility, the medical teams, the quantum computing integration. We're going to save so many children, Mason. His throat tightened with emotion. Their foundation would ensure that no parent would have to go through what he had with Sarah. The $30 billion they'd committed was just the beginning. They planned to revolutionize genetic medicine. "Come with me," he said suddenly, taking her hand. "I want to show you something." They took their private elevator to the roof, where Miami spread out before them like a carpet of lights. The city that had watched their love story unfold now seemed to glow in celebration of their future. But Mason led her to a hidden door, then covered her eyes before guiding her inside. "Mason," she laughed, the sound rich with joy. "What are you—" He removed his hands, and her gasp echoed in the space. The nursery he'd secretly created was a marvel of technology and luxury. One wall was a quantum-enabled smart glass that could display anything from soothing galaxies to educational content. The crib was a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, crafted from rare woods and precious metals by artisans who had worked for 3 months to perfect every detail. But it was the ceiling that brought tears to her eyes. A perfect recreation of the night sky, complete with shooting stars and constellations that would adjust to match the real sky above Miami. Their son would grow up reaching for the stars, both literal and metaphorical. "It's beautiful," she whispered, moving to touch the crib's intricate carvings. Each one told a story. Quantum equations hidden in classical designs, their initials woven into patterns that seemed to shift in the light. "When did you—" "I've been working on it for months." He moved behind her, his hands on her shoulders. "But there's more." A hidden panel slid open, revealing a smaller room adjacent to the nursery. This space was simpler, more intimate, with a rocking chair and walls covered in photos. "Sarah," Angeline breathed, recognizing the baby pictures of Mason's first daughter, "and Maria." Mason pointed to photos of Angeline's sister, showing her journey from illness to recovery. "Our son should know his family's history, the strength he comes from on both sides." Angeline turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "You wonderful, impossible man." She pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of salt and joy. The kiss deepened, passion igniting between them as it always did. Pregnancy had only enhanced their desire for each other, making every touch more electric, every moment more precious. Her heart thundered against his chest as he lifted her into his arms, carrying her to their private suite adjacent to the nursery. The silk of her gown whispered to the floor as they came together, their lovemaking both tender and urgent. Later, as they lay tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, Angeline traced patterns on his chest. "The media's calling us the most powerful couple in tech history," she mused. "They don't know the half of it." He kissed her shoulder. "The quantum integration patents alone are worth more than most countries' GDP. I wasn't talking about money." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the city's glow. "What we're building, it's about more than wealth or power. It's about changing the world for the better." Mason touched her face gently. "Like you changed my world." Their second round of lovemaking was slower, more deliberate, every touch a celebration of their connection. Her pregnant body was a miracle to him, more beautiful than ever as she moved above him, silhouetted against the Miami night. Morning found them in the Foundation's new headquarters, preparing for the opening ceremony. Angeline wore a cream maternity suit that somehow managed to look both professional and sensual, while Mason's bespoke Tom Ford emphasized the power couple image they projected. The first research teams arrive next week, she reported, reviewing holographic data displays that floated around them like digital constellations. We're already getting applications from the world's top genetics experts. And the quantum computing integration? Ahead of schedule. She smiled proudly, one hand rubbing circles on her belly. Our son kicks every time we run a successful simulation. I think we have a future scientist on our hands. The opening ceremony was a global event. World leaders, medical pioneers, and tech visionaries gathered to witness the launch of what would become the most advanced medical research facility in history. But as Mason took the stage to give his speech, his eyes were fixed on Angeline. She sat in the front row, one hand on their unborn son, the other holding a photo of Sarah. The sight nearly broke his voice as he began to speak. 3 years ago, I lost my daughter because medical science wasn't advanced enough to save her. Today, we ensure that no other parent faces that pain. The Sarah Matthew Foundation isn't just about research or technology. It's about hope, about love, about the legacy we leave for future generations. He held out his hand, and Angeline joined him on stage, their fingers intertwining naturally. Her presence gave him strength, as it had since the day she'd walked into his office and changed his life forever. My wife, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives changed, in hearts touched, in futures brightened. Together, we're building something greater than ourselves. The applause was thunderous, but Mason barely noticed. His world had narrowed to Angeline's radiant smile and the movement of their son between them. Later, as they stood in the quantum research lab that would help save countless lives, Angeline pulled him close. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being brave enough to love again, for helping me build something meaningful, for giving our son a legacy he can be proud of." Their kiss was witnessed only by the Miami sunset and the promise of tomorrow. They had built an empire of wealth and power, but their true legacy would be measured in lives saved and futures changed. And it had all started with a $10 million proposition that turned into something priceless: true love. As night fell over Miami, they stood together in the nursery, watching the stars appear on the quantum ceiling. Their son moved between them, already reaching for the light, already part of something greater than himself. "This is just the beginning," Angeline murmured, nestled in Mason's arms. "Of what?" Her smile was radiant in the starlight. "Of everything." Chapter 12. A New Legacy. The Miami evening was painted in shades of amber and gold when Angeline first felt the contractions begin. She stood in their penthouse office at Matthew DeSosa Tower, one hand pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows as a $5 billion merger deal hovered in holographic displays behind her. "Mason," she called softly, her voice carrying that special tone he'd learned to recognize. He was at her side instantly, abandoning the conference call with Asian markets. "Is it time?" She nodded, her dark eyes meeting his in the reflected glass. At 9 months pregnant, she was more beautiful than ever in a flowing emerald silk dress that emphasized her curves. "Your son has impeccable timing, right in the middle of our biggest deal of the year." Mason's laugh was tender as he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her swollen belly. Just like his mother, making dramatic entrances at crucial business moments. "Like father, like son," she countered, turning in his arms. "He's already showing his Matthew timing." The private hospital wing they'd prepared occupied an entire floor of Miami's most exclusive medical center, original art worth millions, adorned walls equipped with the latest medical innovations. The quantum computing system they'd developed monitored every aspect of Angeline's condition with unprecedented precision. "Mrs. Matthew," Dr. Lexith greeted them as they entered, Everything is prepared according to your specifications. Mason had spared no expense. The world's top medical team was assembled, supported by the quantum-enhanced diagnostic systems developed by their foundation. The birth suite looked more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital, with views over Biscayne Bay and furnishings that would shame most five-star resorts. "The merger," Angeline said between contractions, still thinking like a CEO even now. "Vincent has it handled." Mason kissed her forehead. "The only merger I care about right now is the one between our hearts that created him." Hours passed as their son made his way into the world. Angeline was magnificent, her strength and grace evident even in the midst of labor. Mason never left her side, his voice a constant comfort, his hands providing whatever support she needed. "Tell me again," she whispered through a contraction, gripping his hand. "How we met." His laugh was soft. "I tried to buy you for $10 million. And instead you bought me, heart, soul, and empire." Her smile turned to a grimace as another contraction hit. "Worth more than 10 million. "Worth everything," he corrected, kissing her damp forehead. "You gave me back my heart, my future, my ability to love." As midnight approached, the quantum monitors showed the final stages beginning. The city lights sparkled below, and somewhere in the distance, fireworks exploded, as if Miami itself was celebrating. The moment their son entered the world, every quantum-enabled device in the hospital wing responded to his first cry. Screens lit up, monitors pulsed, and somewhere in the building's vast computer systems, a new program activated, designed by Angeline months ago to mark this exact moment. "Mason Matthew Jr.," Angeline breathed as she held their son for the first time. "Welcome to the world, my love." Mason's vision blurred as he looked at his wife and son. The baby had Angeline's dark skin and his own grey eyes, a perfect blend of them both. But it was more than physical features. There was something in the way he looked at them, an intelligence that seemed beyond his newborn status. "He's perfect," Mason whispered, his finger caught in his son's strong grip. "Just like his mother." The quantum monitors confirmed what they could see. Their son was healthy, strong, and already showing signs of the exceptional brain activity they'd hoped for. The combination of their genes, supported by the advanced medical care they'd pioneered, had produced something remarkable. As dawn approached, Mason stood by the window with his son in his arms, while Angeline rested. The Miami skyline was beginning to glow with the first light of day, and he found himself telling his son about the empire he would inherit. "But more important than the money or the power," he said softly, "is the love that created you. Your mother taught me that some things can't be bought. They have to be earned through trust, courage, and opening your heart." "He's too young to understand corporate philosophy," Angeline's amused voice came from the bed. Mason turned to find her watching them, her beauty somehow enhanced by the gentle exhaustion of childbirth. The morning light painted her in soft gold, making her look like a Renaissance Madonna. "He's a Matthew de Sosa," he replied, bringing their son back to her. "Business is in his DNA, but so is love, thanks to you." As Angeline cradled their son, Mason activated the room's holographic systems. The walls came alive with images. Sarah's smiling face, Maria's recovery journey, the Foundation's latest breakthroughs, a tapestry of love and legacy surrounding their new family. "While you were in labor," he explained, "something extraordinary happened. The quantum computing system. It solved the genetic puzzle we've been working on, the one that could have saved Sarah." Tears sparkled in Angeline's eyes. "When?" "The exact moment he was born." Mason sat beside them on the bed. "It's like he brought the key with him. The breakthrough will save thousands of children." "Of course he did," she said, looking down at their nursing son. "He's the product of the two most brilliant minds in tech, born in a quantum-enhanced environment, surrounded by love and possibility. He's going to change the world. He already has, Mason said softly. Just like you changed mine. Their son's tiny hand reached up, catching a beam of sunlight, and in that moment, Mason saw their whole future, the lives they would save, the innovations they would create, the love they would share. "I love you," he whispered, first to Angeline, then to their son. "Both of you. More than all the money in the world." "We love you too," she replied, her free hand finding his. "Our perfect trinity." As the Miami sun rose higher, painting their world in light, Mason Matthew held his family close and marveled at the journey that had brought them here, from a cold business proposition to a love that had transformed not only their lives, but the very future of technology and medicine. Their son was more than an heir to their empire. He was the physical embodiment of their love, a promise to the future, and living proof that the greatest wealth couldn't be measured in dollars. It could only be measured in heartbeats, in tender moments, in the courage to love beyond reason and trust beyond fear. In the end, what had started as a $10 million proposition had become something far more valuable, a legacy of love that would change the world forever. And as their son drifted to sleep between them, his tiny hand still reaching for the light, Mason and Angeline knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Together, they had built an empire. Together, they had found true love. And together, they would write a new chapter in the story of what it means to be truly, completely, eternally rich in all the ways that matter most. The end.